This is probably the most exciting part of the plant, the leaf. It's where all the action happens. We have photosynthesis going on. In order to do photosynthesis, leaves have the thin flattened part that maximizes light absorption. It's called the blade. And then this, I call it the stem of the leaf, where it attaches to the stem, is called a petiole. And just like all the other parts of the plant, we have the three different types of tissue: dermal tissue, ground tissue, and vascular tissues. Top and bottom surfaces of a leaf are covered by the epidermis, that's the dermal tissue, thick cell walls. The epidermal cells secrete a waxy cuticle. It's a barrier that protects the leaf and limits water loss. The vascular tissue, as always, are made up of two parts, xylem and phloem. Xylem transports water, phloem transports food, aka carbohydrates. The bundles of vascular tissue in the leaf are called veins, and they run from the stem throughout the leaf. Then if we're looking inside the leaf, cross-section wise, photosynthesis happens in the middle layers of the leaf, called the mesophyll. Two different parts of the mesophyll, the palisade and the spongy mesophyll. I don't know how well you can see this, but the palisade mesophyll is made up of cells that are tightly packed next to one another. They look like columns. A palisade in architecture is a walkway that's lined with columns. And so the palisade mesophyll reflects that. Then if you look down below at the spongy mesophyll, you can see that there are air pockets, just like you'd see in a sponge. The air spaces in the spongy mesophyll connect to the outside through these openings called stomata. They allow gas exchange into and out of the leaf. The walls of the mesophyll cells are kept moist so that gases can enter and leave easily. Water evaporates, and that process is called transpiration. Is the loss of water through leaves. The lost water can be replaced by water drawn into the leaf through xylem vessels in the vascular tissue. You'll learn how that happens in section 5. Transpiration cools leaves on hot days, but if it happens too much, there's no wilting plant that you're supposed to see here, but imagine a wilting plant, like in my classroom, if I don't get it watered. If there's too much transpiration, the plant will wilt. Gas exchange happens a little something like this. Leaves take in carbon dioxide and give off oxygen during photosynthesis. And then, during cellular respiration, they take in oxygen and give off carbon dioxide, the opposite. Plant leaves allow this gas exchange by opening their stomata, which is what you see here. This is a homeostasis method. If the stomata were kept open all the time, the plant would completely dehydrate. So they maintain homeostasis by keeping stomata open to allow photosynthesis, but then they close them so that they don't lose too much water. The way that these stomata open and close are through these guard cells. Highly specialized cells, they surround the stomata, control the opening and closing. So doing that, they regulate the movement of gases into and out of the leaf tissues. If the stoma is open, gas exchange can happen. If the stoma is closed, it can't. When water is abundant, it basically fills these guard cells up like water balloons, and that opens the stomata. The guard cells can't expand anywhere, so the ends kind of are forced into each other, and they swell up and curve. So it pulls the thick inner walls away from one another and the stoma open. Carbon dioxide can enter through the open stomata, and water is lost by transpiration. When there's too little water, water pressure decreases, water is lost in the guard cells, and they basically shrink down, the stoma close. So this reduces further water loss by limiting that transpiration. Generally speaking, stomata are open during the daytime when photosynthesis can happen, and then they close at night when photosynthesis would not happen. The only thing that could happen with stoma being open is water loss. In hot, dry conditions, however, the stomata might close in bright sunlight because water conservation needs to happen. So guard cells respond to conditions in the environment, such as wind and temperature, and that's how they maintain homeostasis within a leaf. Osmotic pressure in that central vacuole that's filled with water keeps the plant's leaves and stems rigid. If you lose that water in the central vacuoles, it makes the cells a little more flexible. So high transpiration rates can lead to wilting. Here's some different leaves in their adaptations. We're adapting to either dry or low nutrient conditions. The pitcher plant is modified to attract and then digest insects. So these plants live in nutrient-poor soils, and they rely on animal prey as their source of, that's supposed to say nitrogen. I don't know what's wrong with these pictures. They're covering up my text. Here's a rock plant. Rock plants have 2 leaves. They're adapted for hot and dry conditions. So the pitcher plant is adapted to nutrient-poor, nitrogen-poor conditions. This is adapted for hot, dry conditions. They're rounded, which minimizes the exposure of their surface to the air, and they have very few stomata. Spruce trees and other conifers, cone-bearing trees, have narrow leaves. They have a waxy epidermis and stomata that are sunken below the surface of the leaf. All of these reduce water loss from the leaves. And then finally the cactus. Cactus leaves are actually the thorns, interestingly enough. The thorns of this cactus in the picture, the non-photosynthetic thorns, are the leaves. What you see that you would think was a leaf is actually the stem. And that's where most of that plant's photosynthesis is carried out.